Hey, everybody. Welcome to episode number 23, Social Selling for Newbies podcast. Tom Burton here with, I will reiterate, my awesome co-host, Brandon and Carson. Co-host, I said that right?
You
Brandon
said it
and
right
Carson,
this time.
or Carson and Brandon. Maybe I should be saying Carson and Brandon. Either way, welcome to everybody. And yeah, we've got we were just chatting before we went live here. We're going to talk about some pretty cool stuff today, which is now that you have a connection, now what? Right. And how do you turn that connection into a customer? So want to welcome everybody who's live. Welcome if you're on the podcast. Certainly, if you have questions, jump in or comments. We'll go through that. But before we get into all of that fun stuff,
we created a monster.
We have yet another challenge.
But we have all these themes. I love it. We have all these little themes that start to develop around our program.
That's it.
Yes.
So we've got Brandon's lame brain versus Carson's chat GPT.
That's right.
It's a
dad joke.
Right.
Dad joke competition.
Dad joke challenge.
Dad joke challenge. Lame brain versus chat GPT.
So please vote in the chat with which one you think's better. We're going to do Brandon first.
All right, Brandon.
Okay.
Pressure's on.
All right. Yeah, lots of pressure. Let's see. What do you call Batman when he gets hurt? Bruised Wayne.
Oh. Okay, so we asked chat GPT.
That was successful, man. I got a groan. I mean, that was a good groan.
That wasn't bad.
That was okay. The real test is to tell it in your household and see what your wife and kids do, how many groans you get, because I get a lot every day. I asked ChatGPT, tell me a dad joke I can tell to start off my podcast for salespeople. Sure thing. Happy to help. Here's a classic dad joke that's sure to start your podcast off on the right foot. Why did the Scarecrow win an award? Because he was outstanding in his field.
Oh, man. Chat GPT. Over the lame brain.
That was a good one. Yeah.
It was a good one.
All right. It makes me think Brandon. I'm going to give you another shot.
Okay. What do you call a snowman? What do you call it when a snowman throws a tantrum? A meltdown.
Oh, that's good. I like that one. That's good. All right, we're going to end off with that note. That's the best one yet.
Yes.
Lame brain won. Did I really beat Chat GPT?
0 today.
All right.
Awesome.
All right. Well, let's get into it. And I think Jeremy, I don't know if Jeremy liked the Chat GPT joke or the Brandon joke, or maybe both of them.
Maybe.
Yeah, come on, Jeremy. It's coming down to you.
I think he's saying both of them.
Yeah, he's a fan. He likes dad jokes.
All right. So, we wanted to talk about how, we've talked a lot on this show, right? About going out to people or prospects you don't know, trying to build that connection, get that healthy connection, the things that you do to get that healthy. Brandon, I thought it was lame brain.
Thank you, Jeremy. Lame brain. I'll take lame brain. Either way, I won.
All right. Yeah. No. Okay. It's unanimous.
Thank you, Jeremy. Appreciate it. Thank you.
So anyway, what was I saying? So we were saying on the previous shows, right? We've talked a lot about how to get that connection, to go out, social prospect, what you do, don't pitch slap, all those types of things. But today we're going to talk about, okay, you have a connection. Now what? But before we do that, and I really want to get, reiterate both from Brandon and you, Carson, both. What do we mean? We've talked a lot about healthy connection, right? It's not a matter of just getting a connection, but a healthy connection. So let's define that again, so everybody's really clear where we're starting from, which is that healthy connection and what that is. And then we'll build on that to go from there. So Brandon, since you were the winner, you get to go first.
Oh, I get to go first. Look at that. Yeah. I mean, I think, I look at connections in 3 categories. There's a no connection. There's a connection, which means technically LinkedIn, they're connected to you. And then the third one is a healthy connection. And a healthy connection I define as somebody that you have a high probability, if you reach out to them, they would be willing to have a conversation, have a Zoom, a chat of some sort. So I think that's important because a lot of times I talk to especially sales leaders that are, it's like, get the connection, and then send the message that's really the pitch slap. But you have a low likelihood of converting a new connection into a call by sending out that type of message. They're not really a healthy connection. They're just technically connected. So that's the way I differentiate the three.
And when you say willing to have a conversation, just to be clear, it's not necessarily a business conversation, right?
Right.
It's just a willingness to even get to know each other, or, learn
Yeah.
more about each other, whatever that may be.
Yeah. And it could lead to a business call. It could be a business call. For me, it's really just, have you nurtured that enough? You've connected with them, not technically we are connected on LinkedIn, but if you built rapport, if you commented a few times, whatever that may be, to a point that that person looks at you and goes, yeah, I would like to get on a call, whatever type of call that is, that live Zoom, live call, have a chat.
Okay. So Carson, how does that compare to your definition?
Yeah, I think Brandon is spot on per usual. However, the caveat that I would add would be this, and it's, there's, when you create the connection, I think it's really important to realize that that differentiation between that no connection versus you have that friendly dialogue and you're actually working toward gaining or earning a meeting, right? So the way I look at this, when you're looking to turn a connection into a customer, or at least a connection into a conversation, because that's the next logical step, is realizing, look, we've talked about this before. I'm not going to turn that connection into a customer or even a conversation just by posting about how great my company is. So what I usually aim to do in that regard is I will look at the profile, I'll contemplate the industry, what I know about that organization, what is at my fingertips, and I think about what's the value that I'm going to be able to bring as I try to start that conversation. But again, we've talked about this before too. It's all about probability and odds. I mean, I know if I reach out to 100 people with the messaging that I use today, I usually get about a 50% acceptance rate of that connection request based on a personalized ask. Next step, wait a few days. Don't seem too opportunistic, jumping into the DMs and sending pitch slap. Do your homework. Understand, do I share an alma mater with this person or a former employer? Do we have mutual connections that it might make sense to have them more formally introduce that person to me? So where I really think about it is, how do I turn that no connection into something meaningful? And I look back over some of the key deals that I've had over time that have started off LinkedIn, and it's always been, I'm able to demystify something for them. I'm able to infuse more value into an existing relationship. I'm able to help promote them as a thought leader. I remember vividly one a few years back that we had zero relationship, and wasn't taking my initial overtures, right? But I noticed that this person was a very prolific blogger, and they run a lot of podcasts about security. And so I started thinking, well, hey, let me connect you with some of the thought leaders in our security business. And I would imagine there's a lot we could learn from you. Took the meeting right away. So be very intentional about how you go from that no connection to conversation. That's where I see a lot of success. And that's where you got to lay that initial groundwork.
What's kind of cool about that too is that, the definition of healthy, right, could be quite a spectrum. So, but if you go at it from, how do I make that healthy connection as high quality and as high value as possible, everything else is going to be a lot easier downstream. If I'm making that sort of, I comment. And so I think, if anything, you're probably better off erring on the side of caution, if you will, to make something more healthy rather than trying to rush into it, because you're downstream, which is now what we're going to get into. Now turning that connection to a customer becomes a much higher probability.
Well said.
All right. So now that we've got that healthy connection, okay, now what? So what do, and what I'm really interested in hearing from both of you, and I know my viewpoint on it, but how do you, I would assume that one of the first things you have to do is kind of know what the end in mind is, right? What are you trying to accomplish? What does it mean to have a customer? What is your outcome on that? Is that something that, both of you would tend to do, is really look at, okay, before I start figuring out what I'm going to do, what do I want to achieve?
Well, I think part of it is thinking about what's possible. Not every solution or every product in your toolkit is necessarily going to fit, right? And so again, I think it falls back to that intentionality piece and really thinking about, me personally, I try to cast a pretty wide net. I try to go in with something very specific, and I try to take a counterintuitive approach. I've reached out to enough customers in my day in various roles and companies. So you start to kind of gather, like, what's the common reason that maybe somebody pushes back or objects to meeting with me or doesn't necessarily want to do business with me. And I try to build a counterintuitive approach into my outreach. Right now, we're hearing from a lot of customers, hey, like there's interest in creating new potential revenue streams during, challenging economic times. There's interest in, deeper partnership and collaboration, forming mutually beneficial relationships and partnerships where maybe you sell something, I sell something, we have mutual customers. So it benefits us to work together where we have, maybe you've got a stronger relationship than I do or vice versa. Let's figure out ways that we can partner together in that ilk. So there's a lot of meaningful ways that we can be helping people right now, helping them do more with less, take out competitive or disparate solutions. There's so many different things that we could be doing. And I try to build a very counterintuitive approach into turning that new connection into a meaningful conversation. But I cast a wide net because I also don't want to pigeonhole myself. If I go in talking specifically about just one product, one solution, or even a massive product and solution or platform, it could scare them away. And, that's the last thing you want to do. You want to start out from that sense of partnership and willingness and ability to explore what might be possible. Maybe you've got a unique vantage point or perspective. And then maybe you show up saying, hey, we're currently having a lot of success with other customers of your ilk with this type of work. This type of partnership, this type of solution, this type of creation of new revenue streams. Would love to explore what's possible and then trying to get the meeting that way.
Interesting. Brandon, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think, there's several ways within LinkedIn to capture attention and gather intel. So if you get a connection request, when you send it, I assume that the person's probably going to click and look and see who the heck is this person. So they're going to look at our profile. So what we say about ourselves in our profile, I think is really important to get that connection request. But then also it sets the foundation for what they think they want to do next. So we've all experienced, I'm sure salespeople all experience, you get the connection, they accept your connection and you think, okay, here we go. And then they're radio silent. They just ghost. They don't ever respond to anything. So I think we got to take a look at that profile, especially just our about section. And then what we post, because if we smell like a salesperson, they're going to put us in that category and think of us as a salesperson. So we got to take a look at how we present ourselves with the activity that we can control, which is our profile and what we share from a publishing post standpoint. Now, for those that aren't publishing a whole lot of posts, I get that it's kind of a scary thing for people, but you also have your activity inside of comments. And whether your prospects are publishing and you go comment there, say something intelligent, add value, support them, encourage them, that activity is being watched as well. And it's their impression of you. If you're commenting on things and, maybe you're tagging other people because you say something like, oh, hey, Carson, this is like the conversation we had the other day. Take a look at it or something like that. You're demonstrating that you're a network person. You're involved. You're thoughtful. You're adding value. You're not just all about yourself. You're not just, get the demo, get the close, get the signed thing, take my commission and move on to the next person. So I think that those areas, I see this all the time where those behaviors all add up. It's not like any one of these is the silver bullet, but depending on the way you look at LinkedIn, it's not just, oh, here's my profile, let me just start sending messages to people and gathering demos. We're a holistic person in LinkedIn, just like we are a holistic person in face-to-face. You show up to a business meeting dressed inappropriately, it's going to set a tone, and they're going to have a new filter in looking at you. If your profile screams, hey, I'm in President's Club every year, I take no for, I don't take no for an answer, the buyer's not going to want to talk to you, and I know that's a little bit of an extreme. Well, kind of extreme. There's a lot of people that have that, right? If you're looking at your profile as your resume, when you're job searching, great, that's what it should be. But when you're actively out trying to network and build rapport with customers, you got to tell a different story about how you serve them. So your profile, what you publish, how you comment, where you comment, are you being seen, being active? Then when you're asking for those meetings or you're even sharing content with them, it's a different lens that they're looking at you with. And as I love Carson, I've adopted his expression. It just, all of that increases the probability of having an accepted, a person accepting the willingness to get on a call with you.
What I find interesting is listening to both of you, and then I'm comparing it against myself a little bit, right? Because I'm an engineer. I have a very engineering mindset to the degree that it sometimes really pisses people off. But it's what I'm hearing you say, Carson, and both of you really is, hey, don't go in with a lot of preconceived notions and preconceived expectations, right? Go in, start building the relationship, figure out where you can add value, almost let that guide you to the next step along the way. And if you keep doing that, right, it starts expanding more and more. And pretty soon you have a platform for building a business relationship, which is really interesting. Now I look at it compared to my style a little bit, which is engineering. It's like, okay, I know I need to create demand with a customer. I know I need to get to the point where I've built trust with them. How am I going to accomplish that, right? What content am I going to need to provide? I think there's a good molding of that somewhere in the middle, whereas I think you can have a little bit of direction on where you ultimately want to go, but then have the flexibility to know that it may not go exactly down that straight road that you're looking for, and be willing to accept it and know that sometimes those detours may end up being the biggest, the biggest gain out of all the things that you get. Very, different thing.
Yeah, and here's a story I have from a friend I know, John. He's in the UK and sells, and he sells to the C-suite in the banking industry, and he had been trying to get into a door with a potential customer, and what ended up opening the door, he was kind of flabbergasted because I was working with him on his publishing style, and I said, look, there's at the other end of the screen are still humans, like they're still people. And they resonate with lots of different types of content. And when all we're doing is sharing, brochure, here's about my company and all this stuff, people just start turning off because they really don't care. So as I got him into a mix of things, he ended up publishing a post and told a story. And it was him on top of a mountain holding his bike up over his head. And he was telling the story how he overcame, I think it was a hip surgery. He had this, once in a lifetime biking trip planned. Then he got this hip injury and he was able to overcome it and he still accomplished it, blah, blah, blah. Cool story. Lots of people engage and comment. Well, somebody that saw it and commented on it was an executive with one of the banks. It was on his account. It was one of his accounts. And the gentleman resonated with him because he was also a cyclist. And he got pulled into that story and they started talking about cycling. And then he was able to navigate it into, well, what exactly do you guys do? Oh, this is what we do. Oh, interesting. And then the conversation, the opportunity went from there. And I'm not saying that's the only way that we do it, but we have to realize in casting that net of our persona into LinkedIn is so important because they want to see that we're a whole person. They especially don't want to see us and go, oh, you smell like a salesperson. All you're going to want to do is sell. So all of these different activities consistently, they stack up and they really matter. When somebody looks at you and goes, I've seen them, they've commented, I've seen the types of comments they've done, I can look and see what they post. You know what? I want to talk to this person.
This is an exciting talk track here because, we're looking at taking that connection, which is the lowest hanging fruit of all. It's easiest to get, right? You can get the connection. How do you turn that into a conversation and into a customer? And somewhere in that mix is building community. And we've talked about that on this show a lot, right? I've always taken the approach with my social selling approach of building community around what we do. But to Brandon's point, you can't be that one trick pony that just keeps going out, getting a connection, sending a standard cut and dry message to try to get a meeting, and you operate from that regard. Not everybody's going to respond that way. So if you are very intentional about who you need to have relationships with, if you're very intentional about the different types of conversations that you can have, the different value that you believe that you can bring to either that title or that organization, those are the things that you need to be very intentional about. You can, we've talked about before, you can control your quality of message, quantity of outreach, and then obviously consistency of execution. But think about all the different meaningful ways that you can engage with a customer, right? It isn't just about sending an email or sending a DM. You think about, maybe I build a LinkedIn group and I invite people to that, or I build an event and I invite people to that. I send a newsletter to people, or I do posts that encourage engagement, and doing multifaceted approaches to those posts. We've talked about that on prior shows. Brandon has illustrated a great number of examples of different types of posts that we can make. We can make one about our business, about our organization, about what we do. We can talk about success stories that our organization has had with specific customers. We can also share personal posts that show that we are, after all, human. And what's interesting is I look at some of the relationships that have been built, and I'll talk about like ones that have gone from, we had no relationship whatsoever. We met these customers on LinkedIn. They weren't looking at us. They were looking at the competition. We earned the meeting because of something provocative that we said around value that we thought we could bring, all the way to other situations where a customer saw my podcast and wanted to be on it and talk about leadership and culture and things of that nature. And now we have an opportunity that we're working on together, but there was no preconceived notion there. It was merely a connection that turned into something because they were invited to be on the show. I can't tell you how many times people too will get a newsletter from me and they'll remember that they owe me a response or that I had messaged them elsewhere. And it's like, oh, hey, something, an alarm bell went off and they messaged me back. Sorry about the delay. But they'll respond to the newsletter, not the prior message. You just never know when the planets are going to align. But if you go in with that mentality of building community, you can list off all of these ways that you can show up uniquely, add value, and engage your audience. Your chances, your probability goes up. Just find a multifaceted approach in order to create that dialogue.
Yeah. And I want to unpack the community thing a lot more because I think that's super important. But I also want to jump in here with Jeremy's question. Should I engage by letting them know that I'm not a salesperson? I am a technical founder and may be able to bring value. That's an interesting question.
I love that, Jeremy. And here's the little twist, and try to maybe look at it a little bit differently. Start demonstrating your value in social. And you can do that with the type of post that you publish, but you can also do that with the comments that you make inside other people's posts, especially if you find people that have a pretty influential voice in your space, or a voice that a lot of your prospects listen to, that, their posts are highly engaged. Go read those things and have your opinion, bring your value, bring your thoughts to it, and demonstrate that you bring value. And it brings up the thing the three of us talk about all the time too, is there's also a big mindset shift here. If we're in that world of connections and pitch slapping, it's a mindset. I'm going to hit until, I'm going to play a numbers game and know that if I do this enough, I'm going to, find enough people that want to talk to me. But the mindset shift that we're talking about is constantly seeking to serve, constantly adding value, showing up as a giver, knowing that, when we give, we get. And I really like that. And Jeremy, as a founder, I think one of the tactics that I really like to train with people, and one that I use, I still use, but I use a lot when I first started because I wasn't sure, what do I write? It was just taking customer questions and turning those into a post.
Yeah.
And then taking, your top, take 10 or 15 people in your target list that fit that customer that asked the question, and then send them a direct message. And it's like, hey, I know you're a XYZ by title or in this industry. A customer asked this question. I wrote a post about it. I thought, the answers might be valuable to you. Something like that, where you're demonstrating with your behavior the value that you can bring, not trying to get a call because, hey, let's get on a call. I might be able to add value to you. You're asking a lot, which is my time, which is very expensive, to see if there's value. Demonstrate your value, and then you're more likely to get invited into that conversation.
Yeah, I love the question, Jeremy, because the reality is, think about the different ways that you can exude, embody, and convey that value that you can bring. I mean, yes, you can absolutely message, different profiles and personas in order to convey the value that you believe you can bring. But you can also, I love what Brandon said about turning that into a post, turn it into a blog. Try to pose provocative questions to your audience, so be intentional about the types of connections that you're creating, but to turn connection to customer or connection to conversation, really exude that value that you can bring by telling stories directly to your audience or asking them to engage. I think that's brilliant.
Well, and I think his question about, should I let them know that I'm not a salesperson? I don't think you need to you don't need to let them know anything, right? Whether you're a founder, a salesperson, or otherwise, you're just going to just demonstrate the value by the actions that you take.
Yeah.
So if you take actions that are valuable, right, they may look you up and, oh, he's a founder or whatever, or they may look you up and say, it looks like he's in sales, but that is less important than the value that's actually being provided
Right.
on the whole
Your
thing.
your title matters when they don't know the value you bring, because they're going to look at the title and make assumptions. Oh, this is a salesperson trying to reach out to me. They want to sell me something. But when we're demonstrating value over and over, they don't really care what your title is, because the content you've been sharing, the messages you say in comments or blogs or anywhere else, that speaks for you, and that speaks a lot louder than your title.
So, it's interesting you say that, Brandon, because I'm wondering in the future if we're all going to start getting introduced more by our value proposition and less about our title. Everything has been so title centric over the years on all of that. But really, if you look at the value, that proposition that you're bringing or can bring with your expertise, it's a different way of looking at that person.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, and sharing our titles, it's kind of like stereotypes. It's just the easy, quick way to get somewhere. And titles are just easy to say, but I know when someone introduces me who knows me and knows a lot of, the information that we bring and the people that we serve and all that, they don't say, oh, he's, here's his title. It's more of like, oh, and he XYZ, whatever it is. And they kind of will describe the value that I bring as part of that.
Yeah, no, great question. Thank you, Jeremy. And I want to go back, Carson, to what you were just talking about community. And I think, community is a hot word right now. A lot of in the marketing world, there's a lot of talk about community and building communities. We've created or started to create a community on our own. So, but I think there's kind of two ways of looking at that community. And this kind of ties into the next question I wanted to talk about, which is when you're working, especially in a B2B relationship, there may be multiple stakeholders and multiple people involved in the buying process. So it's not just one person you have to build a relationship with. But when you start, Carson, when you talk about community, do you think a lot about, hey, a community maybe within a company, like an intra community, and then there's also sort of an inter community where I'm potentially building communities with, or at least relationship or engagement across companies, and with different purposes? Are you looking at them from both lenses?
I think it's important to look at it from all lenses that are that play into your potential wheelhouse. And I'll give you some examples. First off, when I started out in, selling, a lot of, B2B business that I was doing was with smaller operations. I mean, we could do, 1, 5, 10 employees all the way up to, now where it's hundreds of thousands of employees. And so it could be different specifics around industry verticals, verticals within the verticals, I like to call them. You could have different subsets, lines of business, strategy, data, infrastructure, financial, any and all of these things. And so be intentional about the communities that you can form. Is there a benefit if I get people that manage cloud security at multiple organizations talking to one another? Yes. Is there benefit to, getting some folks that may face common circumstances talking to one another? And I think that's the challenge you want to kind of pose to yourself. And that's where I start to think about, like, okay, look, I'm just very resourceful. That's really been the only reason that I've been successful in my career is I survey the playing field. I figure out what resources are at my disposal and how I can best use them to benefit my customer. That's it. And so if I do that in this case, and I build community in this case, it's about thinking about, okay, what types of other people that I can connect with would be of value to the people that I am seeking to serve. And so, it could be connecting the CIO at an organization that I support with the CIO of an organization that I don't support, but one of my colleagues does. And then we feel that there could be mutual value there. It's that outside the box thinking. Sometimes it's not just like my connection with them isn't the most important one. If I can orchestrate a connection for them, that might be the real value. I've had folks within my organization that I found that are just brilliant strategists. So I don't need to be the brilliant strategist. I can get this meeting, and then I bring the brilliant strategist to the meeting, and then the magic happens. So I think it's, it could be communities of 2 all the way to communities of several that are doing very similar work together. And this can be applied to anything. When you're going out, building your strategy for your book of business, all the way to scenarios where, you get a sense that a customer is going to go with the competitor or, whatever it is. There are ways that you can build community, add value that maybe your competition isn't thinking about. But at the end of it, it's about connecting and, how you can use resources to build value for them. So just think about the different communities that would benefit them.
Well, and even within a company, right? I remember when we were talking about your 9-figure deal that you did, right? You connected with what you said, several hundred people within the company itself. And so there was the community within the company there that to a large degree, you were the community leader, even though you weren't part of the company because you were facilitating it and driving a lot of the things. And I think I remember you even saying like people would leave and new people would come in and you were the coordinator. Hey, you better check and meet so-and-so and all of that, even within the company. Now, obviously that was a very large enterprise situation, but that can certainly be applied, Brandon, I would think even in a small company or in a small situation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, I think, especially in this post-COVID world and digital is becoming more prominent, more people are working from home. I think that sense of community online has just become more and more important. And wherever we can be the center or kind of be a glue of creating community, that's influence. And we all need to expand our influence, right? It's who we know, not just what we know. And LinkedIn is just a very powerful way to do that. I mean, I think the other thing, similar to community, but I think more and more people should be going live. Have shows go live. I'm thinking of bringing my digital influence message back up, which is the show that I had and the 3 of us created, Social Selling for Newbies, because the more opportunity we have to give and demonstrate our value over and over again, we just start attracting people that need it. And it gives us that opportunity to go, man, our community keeps growing and growing and growing. And Carson, your LinkedIn network and your following is huge. And it's because you bring people on your show and they talk about leadership, talk about culture, talk about, your imposter syndrome one, right? All these are so relevant topics that people care about, need to know, and then they start looking to you as this expert in it. And not to take anything away from you, what you're doing is brilliant, but you're bringing experts together and letting the experts talk about it on your show, and you're getting a lot of that. Yeah, and you get a lot of that influence credit, right? You're building all that equity with people by bringing people in, spotlighting them, letting them go be awesome, promoting them, and you get residual from it. And that's influence. And we need to be focused on how we continually build our influence. And when you use LinkedIn, like what we're doing, is doing it at scale.
I'll make an analogy that I think is very applicable to how you should think about your social selling, community building. And it's very similar to when I was promoted. And the advice that I got was, you've got to transform yourself from being the hero to being the hero maker. And that's exactly what we're doing with these social selling community buildings, is think about how you can make your customer the hero. How can you shine the light on what they're doing, spotlight them? They are people too. They care about causes and all kinds of things, which opens the door to potential communities that can be built. And that is ultimately relationships beget deals, period.
Yep. I love, Tom, I don't know if you're going to get it, but Julian's comment on there. I love this for us, but I love this as the example of what we're talking about. And Julian said, discovered you guys last week through LinkedIn. I really appreciate the value you guys give. Influence is powerful. I mean, he just demonstrated what the power of this is. And it could be the live show, it could be podcasts, it could be YouTube channels, it could be your publishing content. I love, and we've getting him teed up is Seth Radman, Carson, and you mentioned him a while ago. Seth's model, if I remember correctly, was he just decided he was going to post in LinkedIn every day. And he was going to post things about what he was thinking, what he was going through, observations that he had. He just started speaking from the heart and, speaking in terms of writing posts. And he was like, 400 and some days into it the last time we talked about him, because he wrote a post that said, this is how my life's changed, just because he started publishing in LinkedIn every day and sharing what he thought, what he observed, what he knew, who he knew, all that stuff. That builds influence. And if nothing else should motivate anybody to start publishing content and sharing their voice, is that 1% of LinkedIn users publish on a regular basis, and they generate over 9 billion views per week. If you're not in that 1%, man, what are you waiting for?
Yeah.
Carson, did I talk enough there for you to get the movie reference?
Yeah, you did. I struggle. We have these little themes in each of these episodes. So if you haven't figured out by now, I'm this huge pop culture nerd. And so throughout this conversation, I keep thinking about like getting away from old ways of selling and, the pitch slap and the, spam messages, and just genuine, authentic brand building. And, I think about my one of my heroes, Jerry Maguire, in all this. So Jerry Maguire, he comes from the the cutthroat sales, sports agent business, and he writes this kind of this manifesto about how they should invest more in genuine relationships, and he gets laughed out of the business. But he calls all of his old clients. He manages to nab one, and then obviously I'm not going to give any spoilers, but he also pulls one of his office assistants, and ultimately it leads to a great brand building. But I always think about him like transitioning from the show me the money mentality to who's coming with me, and what he stood for, and values. And that's really what we're doing here with LinkedIn, with connecting and building connection and bringing connection to customer. It's like, who's coming with me? This is what I stand for. This is what I have to offer. Check out my profile. These are the different ways that I want to serve and support you, but also shine a light on what you're doing, evangelize what you're doing, and make you, Mr. and Mrs. Customer, the hero. And I think if you show up with that mentality, that mindset, and that approach, that's how you're going to turn connection to customer. Period.
He overachieved today on the movie reference. That was
Yeah.
over the top.
Yeah.
Well done.
Well, and I was sitting here thinking like, gosh, I kept thinking of like Breakfast Club and Bringing Community, but man, Carson, you knocked that one out of the park. And I just watched it last weekend for, I don't know, maybe a half hour. It was on and I was like, oh, the next thing I know, I'm sitting down and I watched a good, probably 30, 40 minutes of the end of it. It's such a good movie.
It's brilliant.
So I got one final question before we wrap up here today. And I think, going back to even, right, we're talking about selling at the end of the day. But as you build community and you start to see the traction of that community and the relationships and that ecosystem, right? It's really an ecosystem that starts to build. How do you use that to start, when you get down to brass tacks of forecasting or being able to have some prediction on what's coming? Are there some signs that you see that go, okay, I know that my probability of turning this into a profitable business relationship is, what are some of those signs, I guess, of success in terms of leading it towards a business outcome that you see as you start to build through this?
I'll be
Carson?
brief. I mean, I'd love to hear Brandon's thoughts, but I think the key element here, Tom, is just like you go into the conversations and relationships and the community building with no real preconceived notion, you don't want to rule anything out, right? I mean, you may go in with an ideal like, hey, we think we could do this with this organization, but I mean, it could honestly go in a litany of different directions. So I think the key is, look, we spend a lot of time trying to prognosticate and forecast our business. If I have a first conversation with somebody, I can't accurately forecast where that might go. However, as things progress and proceed, and I get to the pulse of their challenges, their current playing field and their environment and their parameters and where we might make sense and where we don't, I'm trying to earn the right to be a trusted advisor. So I may start out thinking, well, hey, they've got 4 different pieces of their current playing field or environment or solution that I could conceivably play in. So maybe I've got 4 opportunities, or I've got one big opportunity that supports all of that. It's kind of part of my conceivable forecast. But all of us have different stages to that, right? So I encourage people to keep it very early, very preliminary, very uncommitted as we're kind of building out that strategy. But as things progress, ideally that's where we're bringing in, might be, depending on what kind of business you're working in, might be different resources, different conversations we're having, different connections, different colleagues. So I know as this thing takes more shape and more hold, I'm starting to get more of a feel for what's reality. And then the beauty of this, Tom, is that I can learn through that experience. So the next time I start a similar conversation, I'm going to have a heck of a lot easier time trying to forecast that. Right.
Yep. Totally.
Yeah. That's
Brandon,
really
what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was very well said. And to echo that from a little bit different perspective is, is Carson, as you were talking, I was thinking about all my years growing up playing soccer. And my sophomore year of high school, we got a new coach, and he totally changed the way that we played. And our sophomore year, we were doing better. And he kept encouraging us, going, the poor seniors, but he's like, guys, just be patient. Just be patient. It's coming. Just stick with it. And there was times at halftime, it was still 0-0 or something. And we were frustrated. We hadn't scored. He's like, just be patient. You're doing the right things. It's coming. And then my junior year, we were awesome. And I think we got to semifinals of state in California. And, do the right things. Just keep doing the right behaviors and trust the process. I think one of the hard things for business leaders, and especially sales leaders, is it just feels so intangible. But when you do the right things over and over again, especially when it comes to building influence and building and expanding community, opportunities are brewing. They may not be as tangible as you want right now, but it takes time. And my opinion's always been, I'd rather get customers that take a little bit more time to get there, because they end up being longer term customers because they built a solid foundation. So I think that going into community, I think there's some some metrics that we need to start growing it, but we've got to hold very loosely, how much money are we going to make from this? And I mean, look, I think our show, if I can give this as an example, we're on episode 23. And now we have, we're pushing 100 members in our community, and our podcast downloads are increasing. I mean, we just had, Tommy said we had 19,000 views on YouTube. Like we didn't have that week 1 or week 5 or week 8. It just keeps going. But going back to our snowman with an attitude, with the meltdown there, we've got this snowball that's building and building, and it takes patience and consistency. Last thing, Carson, real quick, is one of the data points I've read on podcasts that was motivating. Tom, and you and I talked about this a while ago, and with shows, is most shows never get to 20 episodes.
Wow.
Right? There, I mean, thousands of them. They start.
Most don't get to 10.
Was it 10? I thought it was 20, but they quit. They quit because they don't see the tangible right now, and it's like this is the long game. But once you get there, and then it starts going quicker and quicker and quicker. We've seen that with our own stats. We had 2 or 3 downloads in the first week, and then we were getting 5 and 6, and now we're over 50, 60 a week. And then all of that has opportunity to lead back to where we want people to be.
That's how you take your snowball and you turn it into an avalanche. And I want to say hi to Julian. So Julian, thanks for joining us. Shannon, Jeremy, some great questions today and comments. You're getting a 2 for today on movie references.
Because another one coming.
What Brandon was just describing reminds me of the Peace with Inches speech from Any Given Sunday by Al Pacino. And it's all about doing those hustle stats. The end, the tangible deal, the revenue, that's not there right now. You have to create the conversation, the connection, the synergies, invest, know all the resources, bring those things to bear. There's a lot of nurturing. And, like Tom mentioned, the big deal that I did that I've talked about earlier on the show, I had 7 C-level changes in the course of 2 years, but we were so entrenched there, had so many quality relationships that we were the trusted advisor, and that's why we won in the end. So that's what you want to seek to do. Keep chasing those hustle stats instead of vanity stats, and you're going to be a winner.
Well, and to answer my own question, or give is that, the traditional, 30, 60, 90 forecast, all the stuff that we've all grown up with, I guess, all of that, let's face it, is a lot of guesswork, right? We put a lot of guesses into those things. But when you do what you just talked about, and as Shannon points out, got to water the garden every day, right?
Yes.
So if you water the garden every day, and you do that, then when it comes times to actually do predict what's coming, your probability is going to be, not only in terms of the result, but the size and the scope and everything else is going to be right on, because you already know. It's like, it's not a guess anymore. It's just, here's what it is.
Yeah. Like Jeb Blunt calls it sacred prospecting hour. And, I talk to sellers all the time, and a lot of them don't want to do it. They don't want to invest the time going out and creating conversations and pipeline, because it's not easy. There's no immediate gratification. But guess what? The people that are doing it are more successful, period. We've proven that. We've seen that in all the stats.
Yeah. And that, the stats we saw with social selling that Gartner and others put out, and I don't remember the exact numbers right now. I haven't looked at them for a while, but it was like people that incorporate social selling were, 80% more likely to meet or exceed quota. But then the sales leader's questions was, well, how much time is this going to take? We're like, wait a minute. How did you get to the question of how much time is this going to take if this is a valid data point? And it's just that mindset shift. Like, yeah, this may not be, and companies got to figure out if we keep looking at 30-day cycles and the wins in 30 days, we're missing the point. It may take a little bit longer, but then all of a sudden your 30-day cycles are just killing it because of all that momentum, all that backfill that's taking place.
A flywheel.
I've spent hours upon hours building foundation, manual exporting marketing leads that had a higher propensity to respond. They didn't respond to like a onesie, twosie email approach, but as I engaged them with newsletters and webinars and all those things, I have never once regretted a single second that I have spent trying to social sell, period.
Well, I think that's a great way to wrap up today.
Can I throw this out, Tom, real quick before we do it though? Because I think we need to do this topic again. And Tom, you kind of facilitated today, but I think we turn the tables another time and let us facilitate and ask you questions, because your book has a ton of very awesome, relevant information about building a yellow brick road and how to move people along a brick at a time in a very thoughtful, your engineering mind method and way. And I appreciate that we had this topic. I appreciate you facilitated today, but I think we're doing you, but everyone else listening, a disservice by not letting you share the model around the revenue zone. So let's tee this up and do it again, and you be on the hot seat.
We'll do a part two for sure. But I think, and even this is true right in the revenue zone and the yellow brick road, and I think we've nailed it today. We have connection, which leads to conversation, which leads to some form of value-driven community. It's not just a community for the sake of community. It's a value-driven community, which then leads to customer. And in the yellow brick road, what I'm talking about, again, more of the engineering is, okay, well, how do you engineer that, right? How do you engineer that community with that value in a way that you can do it at scale and repeatably? So it's a bit more science and not 100% art, right? So we want to be, especially if you've got a team, you've got to have this repeatable within a team and all that stuff. So we can definitely do a part two on this.
I don't know though. I don't know if I can come up with a movie reference for Yellow Brick Road.
No, I don't know either. I don't know either.
And I'm going to share with everybody listening what I'm going to do. And this is an example. I love this conversation today. And while we've been having this conversation, I've thought of like 5-6 different people that I know need this in their business. So instead of me reaching out to them going, hey, can we get on a call? I can add value to you. Just give me a chance. What I'm going to do is I'm going to send them a link to the show and give them some show notes and go here, and here these are the certain topics I know based on previous conversations or things that I've seen you post about in social. I think this is very relevant to you. Like that's the way we demonstrate value. And go ahead, Carson.
It's great for pulling the transcript of a video and producing shows for you in 5 seconds. ChatGPT.
I was going to guess that. You didn't even give me a chance to guess. My God. I never would have guessed that would have been it.
Yeah.
So.
Hey guys, today was, I mean, if I can say for us, today was a really good conversation. I think there was a lot of nuggets in there.
And I kind of like at the end of Back to the Future, I feel like we can end this with "to be continued." This is great. We're going to have episode 2, the revenue zone, the yellow brick road.
All right.
Beautiful.
All right. Thanks everybody. Carson, take us home.
Until then.
Well, wait.
What?
Yeah, hold it. Tom, you were gonna tell everybody about Modern Seller HQ since we talked so much about community.
Yes.
Okay. God, rewind. All right, rewind. Back up.
Rewind.
So
just put it on pause there for a second, Carson.
Right. So if you haven't joined Modern Seller HQ, modernsellerhq.com, that's the community we've created. And as Brandon said, it's starting to really gain some steam. We've got some really good stuff in there. We have new stuff coming this month that is going to be, I think, really awesome to take it to another level. And we're starting to get some so go in there. It's free to join, modernsellerhq.com. And you have all the replays of everything in there as well from here. So what more could you possibly want in a community? Plus, maybe we need to have a movie section in there, though, I think. Right? Maybe we should have movie night in the community.
There you go. Hosted by Carson. He can always give a sales talk and then press play.
It's like a director's cut. We'll just do the director's cut.
Make all of our sales movie recommendations in there.
Right.
All right, Carson. It's all you.
Next time, everyone, happy social selling.
All right. Thanks, everyone.